Matthew chapter 20. Matthew chapter 20. We are continuing challenging teaching. I'm going to start reading here in verse 1. Matthew chapter 20. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early into the morning to hire men to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for a day and sent them into his vineyard. About the third hour he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you what is right." So they went. He then went out again about the 6th hour and the 9th hour and did the same thing. At the 11th hour he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why are you standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go out and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the foreman, "All the workers and pay them their wages. Begin with the last ones hired, going on to the first." The workers who were hired at the 11th hour came and received their denarius. So when those who had been hired first came, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These men who were hired last worked only an hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work in the heat of the day." But he answered to them, "Friends, am I being unfair to you? Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. If I want to give to the man who I hired last the same as I give to you, do I not have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. All right. So what is Jesus teaching the people here? I think the lesson is done and we can all go home. Did you catch that? All right. So you understood that one. All right. So it seems to be a fairly straightforward parable with a very important meaning. But I think it's important that we dig in and we kind of understand why we get there. Right? So why is Jesus telling this parable? Why is Jesus telling this parable? To whom is he telling this parable? That's also a great question to ask. Who is he telling this parable to? Or a person?
The Pharisees. I have to go all the way to 19.
19. So Matthew chapter 19. Where are you backing up to?
Verse 3, the Pharisees were also came to him and tested him, is it lawful? So all part of the same, they're all under the same umbrella here. So in 19, the Pharisees started asking questions.
Okay, so the Pharisees are around. Jesus is addressing a crowd. What else takes place? Because that's also important. What's one of the last things Jesus does before he tells this parable? Where's that one found?
He said to the disciples, "Truly I tell you, it's hard for someone rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Then I tell you, for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, rich."
Okay. Yep. So Jesus is addressing here and speaking directly to his disciples. No doubt there are others who are within earshot who are listening in. The Pharisees are always lingering about like a bunch of pigeons on the beach, looking for a French fry that has fallen, right? So all of that is preceding what we're looking at here. Now there's an event that kicks off this discussion with Jesus and his disciples. What event is that?
Was that dinner with the Pharisees?
I believe so. So in verse 16, a man comes up to ask Jesus a question. What question does he ask? What must I do? What's Jesus' response? A man comes up to him and says, "What do I do to have eternal life?" And Jesus' answer is?
About what is good, Jesus.
If you want to enter life, the commandments. Which one?
Right, so the man asks Jesus then, which of the commandments am I supposed to follow? Right? And what's Jesus' answer? Okay, so commandment number 6, don't murder. Don't commit adultery. 7, 8. Of your neighbor as yourself. So he's numbering off several of the 10 commandments. Right? So Jesus is like, which commandments? And Jesus gives a couple of the 10. What's Jesus' point?
All of them, really.
All of them! Right? You should be obeying the whole law. And what is this man's response?
Well, I've been doing it.
I've been doing that. How long?
All my life?
All my life. My whole life I have been obeying the law. So what do I lack? Now Jesus says...
There's the rub.
Their life.
Right.
21, right?
Right, so Jesus has stripped away this man. Now there's a certain fact about this man that is important. What is that? He's rich. This is a young man in position of authority. He has wealth, he has power, and he has religious standing. Right? And Jesus looks at this man after stripping away the question of, why do you think I'm good? You need to obey the law, and the man says, well, I've done that. What do I still lack? Now Jesus gets to the heart of the matter, and what does he ask him to do? Sell everything you have. Make sure you make that nice donation to my jet fund.
No.
Go give it to the poor. Help other people out. Then come and follow me. And the man with joyful heart sold everything he had. No? No, what happens?
He went far away sorrowful.
He goes away sorrowful. Goes away sorrowful.
So the answer to the question is, what do you need? Right? That's the answer right there. The question that he was answering, the question that was asked by the rich man, Jesus was answering him.
Yes. In probably the most rabbinic way we have in Scripture, which is a series of questions that gets to an answer given by the askee.
So what do you need to be saved? You need me.
You need me. And
You
nothing
need Jesus.
other than me. Right? Now, is Jesus saying all of us must be absolutely poor, sell everything we have, be completely destitute, and all you need is Jesus? No.
No. Share your neighbor and share your wealth.
Right. So Jesus isn't saying you have to get rid of everything, literally, to follow me. He is saying that you can't have anything before me. You can't love anything more than me. And this man goes home sorrowful because he loves that wealth, he loves that position of power more than he loves Jesus. It's a matter of the heart. It really is. And Jesus digs down and drills down into that point with this young man in a very short amount of time. And the man sorrowfully goes home. We don't know the rest of the story, right? We don't know what his position was, if any, within the church later on, right? The scriptures tell us that Jesus looked at this man and loved him. Now, we are in a time period right now in America that we've been looking at 20, 30 years of decline in the church. Right? All my life I've been hearing, the church is in decline. Well, I've said it before and I think it bears repeating. When was the peak of church attendance?
50s.
Nope. Nope. When was peak attendance in the church?
2002 it was here.
2002 here, okay. That's close, but that's not quite. When was the peak attendance in the churches of Christ in America?
For the turn of the century.
Early 90s. The early 90s. When I was growing up, that was the peak. That's when the curve turned. Now, in the 50s and the 60s, the church was thriving. The church was growing. We were, pushing out our walls. We were pushing in as many chairs as we could. The place was hopping. The steam got us to the top in the 90s. But all my life, I've been hearing that the church is in decline. Right? Now, there's been a number of things that have been discussed around why. Why is the church in decline? What can we do to take away the hindrances so more people come? This last week, I heard an interesting statistic that came out. The Catholic Church, of all churches right now, is experiencing a boom. They currently have their season of newcomers, of going through their classes to be baptized and to join the Catholic Church. And their numbers have just come out, and they're experiencing a rise. And I was listening to a podcast that was talking about that statistic coming out, and they're asking the question, why? And they were hitting on and wondering about a point that I've made before, which is we've asked too little of people for too long. Now that runs backwards to most church growth, megachurch, modeling, and marketing, doesn't it? If you want more people to buy into a movement, to join a group, to buy a thing, you want to take away every hindrance you can. Right? Was that the case, Arnold, in sales, that you were trying to take away all of those hindrances? Objections? Yeah. Right? So you're trying to build value. You're trying to take away any hindrance, any objection to purchasing, right? To buying in. The thing about the Catholic Church is they have quite a stringent startup cost, don't they? You have to invest time. You have to be committed. You have to sign paperwork. Like it's a rigmarole, right? It's not just, come and, claim to be with us, scan the code, give us your information and you're in. right? It's a process. And in theory, that's the easiest way that you get people in the door. You make it as easy as possible. You take away every hindrance. Jesus doesn't take away every hindrance here, does he? He has a guy who comes in loving him, wanting to be like him, and Jesus just raises the bar, makes it harder. And that runs so counter to the way that we think. Just food for thought, right? As we think about what it takes to grow a congregation, traditionally we want to lower and remove all those hindrances. Jesus several times will raise the bar so high that people walk away. And it's like, keep doing that, right? And I think there's a point here where Jesus says, no, it's going to cost you something. You've got to be all in. And if you're not going to be all in, you can be all out. Right? And that is a challenging tone to strike. Arnold, you had a thought.
The disadvantage, I guess, that we have, I have, we don't know the man's heart.
Yes.
So we tend to speak to them based out of our heart. And the reason we do that is because we understand ourselves. It has nothing to do with that. And because that happens, we lose.
Yeah.
You have to investigate a little bit more. The way Jesus was investigating,
Yes.
although Jesus knew. Jesus knew what to say and when to say it. That goes back to relationships. Goes back to knowing each other. We do have that type of formula going. Hopefully you'll have that last say. How long it takes, who knows? Often we get frustrated right away sometimes.
Right. Well, and I know you've experienced this because you've shared a few stories here and there from your years of cells where you give up too quickly on a cell because you think you've lost them instead of continuing to make.
Or that they're not interested.
Right. And we fail to make that investment because we think it's a dry hole, right? And it turns out that no, they were just working through things. And I think the fact of the matter is all people are going to work through things, right? And at some point they're going to count the cost. Whether we encourage them to count the cost at the very beginning or whether they have to count the cost later on, they're going to count the cost, right? And it takes that investment and it takes that relationship to help them walk through that testing and that counting of the cost in a safe space. And I think one of the things that we've experienced in 2020 and to 2025 in the church as a whole is there was a lot of people who were coming who hadn't really counted the cost, and then it got really hard and the cost got real high, and a lot of people said, no, I'm out. And we went, well, where are you going? I thought you were committed. And there was never that full buy-in, right? They were just kind of on the outskirts, and we were content to, and the way we've described the problem in the past is we let them drip dry in the baptistry, right? We baptize them, we get them wet, and we leave them there instead of discipling them after, right?
Jesus was not trying to convince him.
Yeah.
See, and that's the problem that we have. We want to convince people.
Yep.
And no. Our job, profession, to, this is the truth. this is what is asked of me and all of us to do. He wants us to believe in His Word. Once we come to that, and we have faith in His Word, we get baptized. This is what He's asking us to do. I'm not convincing. I'm not asking you to do it or no. This is it.
Right.
It's your choice. But sometimes, well, you know, you can do it whenever you want. It's up to you. It's like you're trying to convince and trying to remove some of this. Just said, look, have you been doing all this? Yes. Okay. You've done well. Let me add a little. Let me add it a little bit more. Because according to what you're saying, you love God and you love the law. But the law is to love others and show that you love others by ridding yourself of that first love, which is your power. And then come with me, and I will show you. I'll glorify you for that.
Right.
But he couldn't see past that. All he saw was, I'm going to live in poverty.
Right.
I'm going to be like those people begging. And he looks at the apostles.
Yeah.
And that's what he looks. Look at that. He don't want to be like that. I'm used to certain amenities.
Yeah.
So he started weighing this. But Jesus, don't worry, it'll be easy. Wholesale into this. And I think that's one of the problems that we have, that we sometimes try to convince people instead of, look, this is the requirement. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about that. But Jesus wants us to be baptized and to follow him. And as we follow, we shed our inner weaknesses, whatever you want to call them, the weaknesses that hold us back from doing his will. You know, we have to get rid of that hate, that anger, that bitterness.
All those things.
It takes time, and that is the richness that the man could get rid of. And a lot of people, I can't forgive my father. I can't forgive my mother. I can't forgive my brothers and sisters. I can't. It's like I can't let go.
Yeah, no, there's a number of things that often will keep us from that commitment. Right? We can get hung up on the specific of, sell everything and come follow me, and lose the fact that he is asking for him to buy in fully, to leave behind all those hindrances, right, that are holding him back. And I hope, and we don't know this from to my knowledge, from tradition, nor are we told it in Scripture, but my hope is that this haunted him, and that on the other side of the cross, that he had worked through his priorities, that he was able to find his way to God. That would be my hope. So it's this questioning, it's this wrestling with the high cost of following God that is setting the tone for then the discussion that comes next with the disciples. Right? The disciples are like, well, this is what's required, then who can be saved? Right? And then it goes to the eye of the needle deal with the camel, saying, it's hard. Right? In fact, the rich man cannot buy his way in. Right? No amount of donations, no amount of money, no amount of giving to the poor is going to buy your way into heaven. Right? And the poor are not going to get there on the merits of poverty. Right? The only way in is through Christ. Right? That's the only way in. And the disciples kind of come to this point where they say, well, but we've given up everything. Right? We've shed everything. We've given up everything to follow you. And Jesus is like, yeah, you have. Right? But you found me. Right? You're following me. That's the kicker. Right? That's the point. And it's out of that he then gives this parable. It's out of that discussion of being all in for Jesus and following Jesus and leaving everything else behind in order to gain that Jesus then tells his parable about a man who goes out and hires a bunch of people to work in his vineyard. He then goes out again, hires more people to work in his vineyard, goes back a third time, hires more people to work in his vineyard, goes back a fourth time, hires yet more guys to work in his vineyard, finally goes out, I guess he's making a parts run at the end of the day, finds some more guys in the marketplace and says, "What you doing standing around here for?" And the guys say, "We haven't been able to find anybody to hire us." He says, "Well, you can come work for me." Come on, get in the truck. Let's go. Right? So they go out and they work for an hour. Right? Now, it's important that we understand two aspects of the culture to understand what Jesus is getting at here. The first is the concept of the day laborer. The day laborer would go out. He wasn't a slave. He was a freeman. And he'd go out and he would find work. And the work that he would do would then provide for his family. Right? So he was constantly looking for a day of work. The concept of a steady job on, for a company didn't always exist. Right? So you'd pick up a job here, you'd pick up a job there, and you were just bouncing around. And the standard pay for a day laborer was a denarius. A denarius is a day's wage, and it's just slightly more than you need for that day's needs.
How much is it?
So a denarius, I forget the weight of metal. It's a quarter, or it's 1 denarius is equal to 4 shekels. 4 shekels. So I didn't do all the math like I did last time we looked at money on the weight in gold or the weight in silver. What I do have is, since a denarius is worth a day's wage, we can look at minimum wage for a day's labor, right, and then calculate it that way, because that's its buying power. Right, the denarius would be worth a day's labor. Right, so it's worth approximately $63 today. Right, something around that.
It can go from $20 to $100. It's 0.12 ounces of silver.
So there's a number of ways we can look at ancient money. Right, we can look at it by its standard or average weight in precious metal, or we can look at what it was able to do. The important thing for us to understand is a day laborer needed that labor, that money, the denarius, in order to provide for himself and his family for a day. And there was a little bit left, or there should be a little bit left of that need in order to get them through the season where they're not working. Right? So if they're working in agriculture, during that season when there's not as much labor going around, for them to be able to live through that period as well. Right? So the concept of a day laborer earning a denarius is somebody who's living hand to mouth. Notice at the end of the parable, the landowner pays his worker that day. Right? He doesn't say, "Okay, come back tomorrow and I'll pay you." He doesn't say, "Come back on Saturday and I'll pay you." He pays him that day because he needed that money to provide for his family that day. Now, practically the way that works is I work today. I get the denarius at the end of the day. I give that to the wife. The wife goes out the next day and buys that food. So we're talking about technically tomorrow's sustenance, but you're working for that day right ahead.
Just to have a perspective, in today's world, if you're getting paid $15 an hour, you work 8 hours, which you make 120 a day. So that would be your
Denarius.
Your denarius. It would be 120. If you're getting paid 15, if you're getting paid for $7 or $8, it would be like $56. So your day can be from 56 to 120.
Right.
Depending if you're getting paid $8 to $15 an hour. So let's say they're getting paid $15 an hour. So the daily wage for that person would be 120. So the people who work 1 hour got 120. The people who work 8 hours got 120. The idea, right?
That's the idea of what's going on. Now, because we look at wages hourly, right? Because we often look at wages that way, and we often look at a job by what it's worth, right? I mean, this is one of the 101 things I learned working in high school, right? My boss would ask me, one of the elders of the church I worked for, he'd ask me, what can you do more for the business? What can you do more for me so that I can pay you more, right? So I started off making $4 an hour. Minimum wage was $5.55 or something like that at the time. When I was in, what would that have been, 2003? So I was making under minimum wage, but every year I worked for him, I got $1 raise. But every year he expected me to be able to do more things, right? Weld and grind and drive and, you know, work with electricity and get shocked and not die and, you know, all those important things, right? So that's the way that we think about economics. That's the way we think about worth. This landowner is looking at this from a different lens, right? He's not just being generous to be generous, right? Because the guys who worked from sun up to sundown are frustrated that they're not getting more, right? Why is the landowner not being generous to them?
He's already being generous.
How so? He gave them a job. He's provided for them for that day. So that's right. That's right. Now, why is he being so generous with the people who work for 1 hour?
This is his money.
Well, yes, it is his money. What does there's a phrase that they use here.
Well, it's kind of an example. You can get baptized whenever you're 15, 16 years old. Be a Christian for 80 years. Baptized, and Christ is not going to kick you out just because you waited 80 years to be baptized.
Right.
That's the whole point of the lesson.
The phrase that these men use, you have made them equal to us who have done all this work.
And whenever you're going to be treated.
Right. So, from a cultural perspective, the issue that Jesus is drawing upon is the people who worked 1 hour still need to provide for their family. Right? Right. You know, now this guy could have been like, I've been in town 4 times, right, looking for workers, and you weren't there. I know you're lying to me. You got up late, and you being lazy over underneath, you know, the broom tree. You should have been up, you know, hustling more, and I'd have hired you, right? He doesn't do that. He understands that this man needs work to provide for his family. So whether they worked all day or an hour, he understands that their family needs sustenance, so he's going to provide for them, right? But it comes back to this phrase, you've made them equal to us. Now, here's something I found interesting in my research. Brad Young, in his book on parables, has a parable that was often cited told by other rabbis at the time that he thinks fits hand in glove with this one. To whom may we compare the matter? And he's speaking about the value of prophets from different eras. To a king who hired 2 workers. To the first who worked all day and received 1 denarius. To the second worker who only 1 hour and yet received a denarius. To which one was more beloved? Not to the one who worked 1 hour and received a denarius. Thus, Moses, our teacher, served Israel 120 years. Samuel, only 52. Nevertheless, both are equal before the Omnipotent. So, the teachers of Jesus' day, in trying to kind of explain this concept that we've been talking about from the start, about it doesn't matter when you get into Christ, it matters that you're in Christ, uses a similar analogy to drive home the point. It doesn't matter what you do, how long you work. It doesn't talk about how long they've worked, or not how long, but how hard they worked, right? Because maybe these guys who they went out and hired, at the beginning of the day, puttered out halfway through and didn't do a whole lot, and he's like, well, you only gave me a half day's work anyway, right?
But who says it's talking about age?
Right. Not.
So we tend to use age that you get when you're 15 and 80. No. But if you get baptized right now and Jesus comes.
Right. Yeah.
It's
Or you die young. Right?
So, because
Yeah.
you are given this grace, so that means that the end has come. It has nothing to do with you being young or old. Is that the second coming has arrived. That's why you're receiving this.
Right.
So, although you've been at the very beginning with the apostles, or right now, when you see Christ in heaven, you're still receiving the grace.
Right. And the gift is the same.
That's right.
The need for the sustenance for the day is what we need. That's what we're working for. Whether you end up at the end of your life, whether you serve the Lord all your life.
Because we're not, even if we die right now, we're not going to receive, because we're all going to receive it together. Right?
Yeah.
That denarii is not, if I die right now, I'm not going to receive it right now. We're all going to receive it when he comes. So the denarii is given when Christ comes, and everything is a thunder. Everything is gone.
Right.
And there's no more tomorrows. That's it. It's over. So if you got baptized at that moment, that you will receive that denarii. The same person who got baptized, Cornelius, 2,000 years ago.
And for those of us who have devoted our lives to serving the church, like myself, from the moment we left high school, right? Or whether you start serving the church, because it's a second career like a lot of my classmates do, or whether you just attend, right? The reward is the same, right? There's a saying that goes around in preacher circles, right? The pay's not that great, but the retirement benefits are out of this world, right? Right? But the fact of the matter is, I'm working for the same retirement benefit of heaven that you all are working for, right? Now,
Which others have already worked for.
and they've already worked for it, right? And that great cloud of witnesses, right, who have crossed that finish line ahead of us, right, who will not receive it before us,
Exactly.
right? They work for the same reward.
So the end of days is here. And that's why he's, okay, everybody, you're going to get paid.
Yeah.
So the second coming, that's when everybody gets paid.
Right. And I can't go forward to God and be like, so, I get 2 denarius, right? Because, right, started out of high school, right? Served the Lord all my life, right? So where's that second mansion, right? I get a retirement home up here, right? And God's like, what? No, like that's not how this works, right? Like, but I do get a house next to Abraham, right? And he's like, no, that's not how this works, right? Like, the fact is, we are given what we need. We're given that grace. We're given that mercy, and that's more than we honestly deserve, right? That's more than we deserve because we're not earning it. We don't earn our salvation. It's given to us by grace. He's already being generous. Right? So the first will be last, and the last will be first. This equality, right, that we see within the church, within the kingdom of God, is just wonderful. Right? Now it can be a little bit maybe discouraging. Why am I doing all this? Right? Why go through the heat of the day? Right? Friday, I was out before all this wonderful rain and overcast, and it was, oh my, it was hot. Right? I mean, it was, whew. Right? It's like, okay, I understand why there's a siesta. It gets hot. Right? Like,
but it's understandable. See, that's the thing also. We understand that as well. We can see that because if we looked at our lives, there's times in my life when I just say, I'm not too sure if this is correct, or there's doubt. And that's the beauty of it all too, that you're allowed to have doubts, but not to give up. And that's the thing, that the righteous man stands up 7 times while the wicked just stays there. So we see that, we read that in Proverbs. Because why does the righteous man after falling is still righteous? Because he gets up. And as we go in our lives with Christ, there are moments when we fall. There's moments when I have fallen.
yeah.
But that's the thing about being part of the righteous group, is that you don't allow yourself to get up, you dust yourself off. No, I believe in Him. I believe in the Word. I believe in God. Because there's many that have, you know what, I don't believe in anything. They'll leave and never hear from them again. And it's hard because it's within my own family sometimes.
Yeah. And that's why I love 1 John, right? If we're walking in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another. That blood of Jesus continually cleanses us, right? And that's what we're called to. Unto death, until the Lord calls us home, remain faithful. First will be last, and the last will be first. We are all one in Christ Jesus. And it is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
But that's why we don't try to convince people. Right?
Yeah.
That's the reason.
Well,
it's that you have to choose this.
Yeah. We cannot remove every hindrance. We must set before them truth and encourage them to take it. And love them even when they don't. Right? And that's what we're called to in outreach. Right? To love our enemies, to love our neighbors, to love the family of God. Right? In all things.
What you said first. Whenever somebody baptized and they have their sins and stuff, we're also happy to see this happen. But then we stop them right then. I mean, we feel like, I guess, we're doing our part, so it's up to you. And we don't follow up on it with them, we don't, I'm as guilty as anybody else.
Yep.
Being wrong. I was thinking about today, that, there's a lot of elders
And we used to, after we had service or whatever, and then we would sit and write notes, cards, to the people that missed church, that haven't been to church, people that are sick. We used to do that, because I
Well,
was
they
on
did
that
this at
committee.
ladies' Bible class whenever I first started ladies' Bible class, but they don't do that no more. Huh? Yeah, you send cards out, but, I mean, up to, elder, I mean, for instance, like me, just checking up on somebody. Just to have somebody to check up on. I mean, that's like Katie. She could laid out there in that yard for 2 or 3 days, and nobody checked up on her.
Yeah.
But somebody, we need a partner, is what we need. And they don't have to say anything. All you have to say is, I'm fine today. That's all you have to say.
Yep.
We need this in this church.
Yeah.
To check up on people.
Community is important. It really is.
Yeah, it is.
Right? And this parable is set within the setting of community, right? And that is one of those things we have to foster.
But we just forget about people after they're baptized.
But there's two things here, though. That's one thing is community, but also there's the personal responsibility of growth. Because it's not only, yeah, you're taking up and you get baptized, but where's the personal responsibility of reading, of meditating, of coming to church? Because you have to come here as well.
Yeah.
You know, so where's your personal responsibility as well? Because in order for that bird to fly by himself, he's got to practice. But if there, at what time, you know, there's a period of time when you, as the individual, as the believer, have to become responsible for your own strength through Christ. Because, I mean, that I understand there's this, the one thing is as the group, and the other thing is the individual.
Right.
Because that person, how is he going to unburden himself of that anger, of all that, if he doesn't pray, if he doesn't, or she doesn't come, or you know? So there's two things that are happening here.
Right.
I understand
so let-
Edna, but
Right.
you have to have the other part as well.
So let me address what's going on here, and let me remind us of one important thing. The conversation we're having about the importance of fellowship and helping one another in our faith and personal responsibility and all of that, and getting to the end of the Christian walk is a secondary topic adjacent to life, but is not related directly to the parable. I think it's important that we remember that as we have this discussion, because the parable that we just discussed is talking about what the reward is, not about how you do the work to get there. Right? So it's important, you know, it's the whole thing of within the first 30 seconds of the lesson, we had the interpretation, but how do we get there? Right? We need to understand that when we get into this important discussion we're currently having, we've left the parable, we've left into an adjacent topic. Okay? But it's an important topic, and because of that, I want to address it. And to some extent, I've fostered us into it. But when it comes to the Jewish community and how the early Christian practice of these things were taking place because they came out of that Jewish society, the idea of personal responsibility in the way that we think of it today did not exist. And let me explain how that is. Because you would grow up learning, right? And at some point, your role switches, right? Which is what you would be calling personal responsibility. But everything's taking place in community. So you start out as a new Christian, and you have others who are walking alongside you, right, who are encouraging you and teaching you and training you and doing all those things with you. And at some point the role switches and you are the one leading others. But it's always within community. It's always within the confines of community. And what you're talking about being so important, Edna, is that we need community at every stage of our life. Right? Whether we're talking about a young whippersnapper who has muscles in his earlobes, who thinks he can take on the world, he needs somebody to put some common sense into him and teach him that he's not invincible, lest he run off a cliff and hurt himself, or worse. On the other end of the spectrum, we need community to walk alongside one another, to take care of one another when we fall and when we stumble, right? And every point of time in between, right? My family would not have been able to function over the last several years without community, right? Because 2 babies is a lot of baby. We've always had 2 babies, right? Even when the girls got bigger, we then had 2 more babies. There's not so many babies, right? You have to function within community, right? Community is important, right? And we cannot be a self-made man, right? That there is a statue that was in Loveland of a guy chiseling himself out of a rock. And it's just the silliest thing you ever saw. Right? I mean, it's cool. But when you stop and you think about it, how did he start? Right? Right? How did he reach up and grab a hold of the hammer? How did he get a hold? Where'd the hands come from? Right? Like, you know, you see the self-made man and he's chiseling himself out, okay, but, you know, even if he started out with his hands up here, like, it doesn't work, right? We only exist within community, and this parable is coming out of that community setting because the man's being generous, not because the people... Father, I come before you today. I thank you so much for your word.